Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Lady Jahantina Rag, and I am the reporter for today. So, how are you? Are you ready? Okay, please listen to me and look at me. We are going to learn the steps in conducting writing the analysis using language-based approach. Okay, so let's go to the next page to start our lesson. Please enjoy. Welcome, teacher detective. Today I was assigned to gather evidences about the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So, as we all know, he was a renowned author of the two literary pieces, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. According to his quote here, the wise speak only of what they know. It is according to J.R.R. Tolkien. That was we saw is the Lord of the Rings. And then the second one that is made through movie is The Hobbit. But the first that is published or that was published is The Hobbit, and the second is The Lord of the Rings. So um there is a small thing about in the timeline of making the movie into um reality. Okay, so let's move on to the next page. Okay, so I chose this two because they are very relevant. We all know that this two are sequels, and then um um there are a lot of things about language that we can learn about these two literary pieces, but I am only focusing in one of these two. So I more focused in The Lord of the Rings because um it is already there. All we have look all we are looking for are there already in The Lord of the Rings alone. So now let's proceed to the next page. Okay, so let's watch this first.
Changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. It began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest, and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men, who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. In the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring to control all others. And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all. One by one, the free lands of Middle-earth fell to the power of the ring. But there were some who resisted. A last alliance of men and elves marched against the armies of Mordor, and on the slopes of Mount Doom, they fought for the freedom of Middle-earth. Victory was near. But the power of the ring could not be undone. It was in this moment, when all hope had faded, that Isildur, son of the king, took up his father's sword. Sauron, the enemy of the free peoples of Middle-earth, was defeated.
Okay, so we have watched already the movie or the clip that was Galadriel, the the elf character, where she is one of uh witnessed in the Middle Earth during the three ages. So as we can see, Galadriel um is a very um well-known character in this movie. Aside from Bilbo Baggins, aside from Gandalf the Grey, so I know that some of you or um most of us known already this literary pieces. So I chose the prologue of Galadriel to emphasize this amazing text that is connected to the language based approach. Okay, so now let us go to these lines here Galadriel had spoke in the clip. Okay, so now in the first speaking or in the first sentence, so in text here of Galadriel, we can already spot the languages that are spoken in this first, second, third, and fourth line. So she uses there one of the languages that um, it's used or that was used in the literary piece, the Elvish language. Okay, so now let's go and proceed to the continuation. So this is the continuation of Galadriel's voice. So I know that you have already heard that earlier in our clip. And let us proceed to the third pages to identify the literary devices that was being used in the Galadriel's epilogue or prologue. So first there is the personification, where For within these rings was bound the strength and will govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, and the ring was made. So we can spot already how the ring is being characterized or uh, an- inanimate with strength and will govern each race, right? And number two here is the hyperbole or hyperbole or hyperbole. The ring gave to Gollum a natural long life. Five for 500 years it poisoned his mind, and in gloom of Gollum's cave it waited. So there is already an exaggeration with the sentences that um we can read. It's obvious that there is exaggeration to the lines here. And also we have alliteration. Just look at this um sentence here. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. So it is very well presented. The lines is being um mean or modified about alliteration. Okay, so now let's proceed to the next page. We have here identify the literary devices that is being used. So they use also imagery. As we read the sentence there, the imagery is there is a lot of imagery there, but I chose only one by one. The free lands of Middle Earth fell to the power of the ring, but there were some who resisted. A last alliance of men and elves marched against the armies of Mordor, and on the very slopes of Mount Doom they fought for the freedom of Middle Earth. So as you can see, it picturized or it is describing how the place of the Mount Doom is being presented. Okay, so about um, the symbolism that is being used there is the ring, and then for the uh text that that symbolism is obvious is it began with the forging of the great rings. So, three were given to the elves, immortal, wisest, and fairest of all beings. Seven to the dwarf lords, great miners, and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And nine rings were gifted to the race of men, who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and the will to govern each race. So, but they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made, and the land of Mordor in fires of Mount Doom, the dark Lord Sauron forged a main ring, and into this ring poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all of the race of men. So one ring ruled them all. So it is obvious that the symbol that is being used here in the literary text is the ring, the one ring that is made from the malice of Sauron. Okay, so now let's proceed to the next page. Okay, I have listed here the list of the languages in the Lord of the Rings. So as you can see there, this is this is the alphabet of the language, and then there is eight major languages that has been presented to the literary piece of the Lord of the Rings. So mainly, the first there is the Elvish, where according to my research, Elvish, or it is the primitive Quindian. In the Elvish, it contains Alvarine language. So at least six languages are here in the Elvish: Common Eldarin, Quenya, Vanyarin, Nol, Rodin, Quenya, Telerin of Valinor, from Common Telerin but influenced by Kenya. Common Telerin of Valinor, considered a dialect of Quenya. Sendarin, at least three dialects. Non-Rodin languages influenced by Avarin. So for the number two, the languages, Manish languages all showed influence by Abarin tongues as well as Kusdol. So a language of forefathers of the first and third houses of the Atanatari, northern Manish. So Taliska, two dialects. There are two dialects there. The first is the Adonaic. It is a Western influenced by Sindarin and the languages of Eriador. Hobbitish, influenced by languages of Northmen. Sturish, influenced by Dunlandish. Black Adonaic or Black Numenorians. So languages of men of Eriador during the Second Age. Languages of Northmen. Languages of Dale. Rohanis. Language of forefathers of second house of the Atanatari. Southern Manish. Haladin language, Donlandish, Drowadan languages. It is the language of Drodin of Rethel, language of the Wusses of Drowadan forest. So many Haradrim languages, many tongues of Easterlings, language of Losot, languages of dwarves, Kosdul, constructed by Aulye, English Sign Language, languages of the Ents, Old Intish, based on the Common Eldarin, languages of Ainur, Valar, and Maiar, Valarin, languages of the Orcs, many Orcish language influenced by many languages, and then Black speech. So this is the Black speech, constructed by Sauron. So Sauron is, as we all know, he is or he was the antagonist of this movie or literary text. So influenced by Valerian, pure black speech, debased black speech, influenced by Orcish, and then other languages. So as we all know that language making was Tolkien's hobby for most of his life. So the author is really the one who construct all these languages because this is his most hobby. Okay, so he is known to have constructed his first languages, Animalic and Nev Bush, at a little over 13, and he continued to ponder upon his creations up until death more than 65 years later. So language invention had always been tightly connected to the mythology that Tolkien developed. So as he found that a language could not be complete without the history of the people who spoke it, just as these people could never be fully realistic if imagined only through the English and a speaking English. Okay, so Tolkien therefore took the stance of a translator and adapter rather than that of original author of his work. So Tolkien was a very professional philologist and a specialist in the Old English language because he was also interested in many languages outside his field and developed a particular love for the Finnish language. So the inspiration of all of this is the language of the Finland people. Okay, so he described finding of a Finnish grammar book as entering a complete wine cellar filled with bottles of an amazing wine of a kind of flavor never tasted before. So as we can see, Finnish morphology is particularly its rich system of inflection. So in part gave rise to Quenya, as we remember earlier. Okay, Quenya is here in here in wait here in the Elvish. So in the Elvish, the inspiration is the Finnish language. So now, um, let's proceed to the next page. So these are the characters of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. So they are interconnected, but in the Hobbit, there is a younger version of Bilbo Baggins. In the Lord of the Rings, there is the old version of the Lord. There is the old version of Bilbo Baggins there. So old Bilbo and younger Bilbo. Okay? So wait, I will just tell about the character list. Here in The Hobbit, the main character is Bilbo Baggins. But in The Lord of the Rings, there is more focused on the character of the nephew of this Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. So Frodo Baggins' story is really here emphasized in The Lord of the Rings. So as we all know, Frodo Baggins is a young, well-to-do hobbit. When he discovers that the magic ring left to him by his eccentric uncle Bilbo. Okay, so he reluctantly takes on the quest to destroy it, often referred to as the ring bearer. So aside from his uncle, he is the current ring bearer of the ring. This is this is Frodo Baggins. So this is his best friend Samwise, and then um this is Gandalf the Grey. He has an um evil competitor. This is Saruman. And then who can forget about this Legolas? He is the one um we can remember, or we can say, the great archer. He is the one um who used archery as his form of w- um as his form of um techniques in fighting orcs. Okay, so there is also Meriadoric or Mary Brandebuck, and then Ferigene Pippin, and then Aragorn. This is Aragorn. Okay, so there are a lot of characters here, but I will just focus on the main, especially Gollum. Gollum is the one. I have no picture of Gollum here, but I know that you know already Gollum. He is the one who always tell or who always speaks about um my precious, if you can remember, my precious. That's his line. So, okay, he is an early rank bearer. He carried the ring, which gave him a naturally long life. So he was living on an island in an underground lake when he lost the ring to Bilbo. So he was living on the he wants it back to him, but sadly, um he was emerged to search for it. But although he fears Sauron and revealed the ring's location to him, he also becomes Frodo's guide into Mordor. Despite of the ring's corrupt influence, Frodo still believes Gollum can be saved. Okay, so other names of Gollum is Smeagol, Slinker, Stinker. Okay, so here is Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins is Frodo's much older cousin, but he was calling Bilbo as uncle. And then he won the ring from Gollum in the Riddle game 60 years before the start of the novel. So he passes it on to Frodo when he leaves the Shire for good. And then the only person have voluntarily given up the ring. And then, okay, there are a lot of characters here. So as we analyze the character, um, we can see that the author is very genius when is very genius when it comes of choosing or thinking of the character that was being presented here in the novel, right? Because the characters are only imagination. Some of the characters are from imaginations, but it very amazing that the author came up to a very great output or outcome, because a lot of people are very interested in watching this kind of movie or interested in reading about this text. Okay, so now let's proceed to the next page. Okay, there are narrative techniques. Okay, I have here the word from Tolkien. It is said that the inspiration of J.R.R. Tolkien is that, according to his own word, what I think is a primary fact about my work, that it is all of a piece and fundamentally linguistic in inspiration. The invention of language is the foundation. The stories were made rather to provide a world for the languages than the reverse. So to me, a name comes first and the story follows. Oh, it is to me anyway, largely in an essay in linguistic aesthetic, as I sometimes say to people who ask me, what is it all about? So it is according to J.R.R. Tolkien. So his narrative techniques is very amazing because of the role of linguistics in the Lord of the Rings. So as we can um as we can see here, a long time lurker on this um okay, after um okay, so after rereading The Lord of the Rings, I was doing some research and learned that an essay in linguistic aesthetics, since I won't be able to read The Lord of the Rings from linguist perspective anytime soon, but want to get as much from it as possible. So I was wondering, linguists who have read The Lord of the Rings, what are the things that come up in their mind? So it is a very long novel, and we all know that the author is very creative, and then um, the author experience helped to provide more informations about building this literary text, and spark of his epic world building was none other than also his wife Edith. So after being called back from his service because he was a former soldier during World War One. So Edith would dance to her husband, and then J.R.R. Tolkien would be completely captivated in those moments. So he wrote a love story where Edith would be an elven princess named Lúthien, and he would be a mortal named Beren. Okay, so now let's proceed to the next page. Okay, so the themes and the motives of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is fiction, fantasy, epic. Okay, so it is an adventure where Christian themes, and it is also influence of a changing world and influence of the World War II. Okay, so it is a fantasy because the Hobbit um says about Gandalf, who invites a hobbit Bilbo to join him, a pack of dwarves, to an expedition to the Lonely Mountain to confront the Smouged Dragon and reclaim their treasure. Throughout their adventure, colorful word choices are selected to help the reader develop visualizations of this imaginary world. The use of expressions, comparisons, and select of language called figurative speeches. Okay, so for example here, the right and facing of the Lord of the Rings. So Tolkien stated in his letters that the core theme of the Lord of the Rings is death and human desire to escape it. But I should say, if asked, the tale is not really about power and dominion that only sets the wheels going. It is about death and the desire of deathlessness. Okay, so for the Christian theme, the Lord of the Rings is virtually a test case for a definition of Christian literature, since it contains not a single reference to religion in general, much less Christ of Christianity in particular. Yet many critics and Tolkien himself also have asserted that it is centrally Christian in conception and execution. Okay, because Tolkien went even farther, and he asserted that the Catholicism of the Lord of the Rings was unconscious at first, but then conscious in revision, as the setting of the Lord of the Rings preceded Christianity by several thousand years. Christian reference would be anachronisms, and pagan references contrary to spiritual truth would also run counter to the vital truths Tolkien was trying to articulate in his novel. So, in many ways, this dilemma was exactly faced by Tolkien's favorite English writer, the Beowulf poet. So, critics before Tolkien had seen that heroic classic as a clumsy and anachronistic mishmash of Christian and pagan ideas. So, or as a pagan masterpiece spoiled with Christian excrescences. Okay, Tolkien in his famous monograph Beowulf, The Monsters and the Critics in 1936 instead suggested that the Christian poet knew he was conveying pagan legend that the Beowulf heroic morality resonated more with Christianity than the later critics would think. So the Beowulf's poet's solution to the tension was Christian commentary on pagan values. So in Tolkien's solution was to explore those virtues common to pre-Christian and Christian cultures and allow them to shine through in the character without comment. Okay, so the motives. Another motives is that the character pairs were occurs in pairs in the story, where pairs of friends like Sam and Frodo, or Legolas and Gimli, and then Gollum is a hobbit-like creature who gave in to the ring's corruption. So Gandalf shows that influence of good can do. So just like another feature of the motives here is the parting ways, the cities, as we can see. For example, Caras Galadhon, the city of Lothlorien, was dwelling places built on platforms in tall trees, showing the elves' preference for living harmony with nature. And with trees, especially Minas Tirith, in contrast, true built into the side of mountain rises imposingly out of the landscape. And the large complex city. It is fashioned in 7 levels. The uppermost level on which the king's residence and throne room are located. The structure reflects the way men stand strong and proud in opposition to Mordor. So, okay, so the influence of the World War II, I have here research, and then I can say that many cities have, like and Frodo and his hobbit friends, leaving the Shire to go on an adventure, and the Fellowship of the Ring, two boys leaving home to go to fight into the world in the two world wars. The story of the Fellowship of the Ring realistically captures the very essence of the two world wars, as seen through the eyes of the generations that lived through them with a lively and vivid friendship, with a foreground merriment and a background to despair. Okay, other influences include the dragons, whose existence has whispered by the hobbits during Bilbo's party. Okay, they were inspired by warplanes and which first used in combat in the World War One. They were still creatures who remained death from above. They were used to frightening effect during the Battle of Somme, which Tolkien engaged in as a signal officer. Okay, so there is also influence of mythology, where um, mythologies, folklore, and traditions from across Europe. So the Old Norse saga and the Volsunga, and the Old High German Nibelungenlied, both from the same ancient sources, told the story of the ring Anbaranaut and the sword Gram, which inspired the ideas that spawned the One Ring and the Numeronian sword Narsil, which was broken at the last alliance of men and elves under Sauron's foot. So Tolkien's Gandalf is also direct derivation from the Old Norse god Odin. So um, who is depicted as an old man with a white beard wearing a wide brimmed hat and carrying a staff. Okay, so there is a lot of motifs that is being presented to this literary text, but it is very long enough to tell some of those. So now let's proceed to the next page. Okay, so let's review and edit. So mythology and Christianity greatly influenced the Lord of the Rings. So Tolkien came from a Roman Catholic background and sprinkled many theological allegories throughout The Lord of the Rings. So while he didn't intend for the books to be religious work at first, he did so after revision. So these themes can be seen and presents of good versus evil. So humility triumphing over greed, themes of death and resurrection, and compassion and healing. So, additionally, Tolkien also incorporated several elements from Germanic, Finnish, Greek, and Celtic mythology. So, for example, here, Gandalf was inspired of Norse mythology, specifically Odin. Both were described as old men and white beards, as I have mentioned earlier. Okay, so the sword Narsil could also have roots that tied to it in hand swordgram that was used to kill the dragon. Okay, other elements such as the Quenya language, that is the Elvish, as I have said earlier, and the Valar took inspiration from both Finnish and Greek mythology. Okay, so now let's proceed to the next page. Okay, now let's remember and refine and right. So, if one can understand all works of Tolkien, he was a big genius in making a magnificent form of literary pieces where combining all he have experienced in life could be just in one book to be read by everyone. So remember, the goal of language-based approach is to uncover the intricate layers of the meaning within the literary work, closely examine author's language. So I hope you understand our lesson. Now let's proceed to the final word. Thank you so much, everyone, and hoping that you have learned something from me. Goodbye.